Well, I have made a mistake, by the way, which is originally beta is capital, big capital K, capital stock in the country, the whole capital stock, divided by Y, which is the income in the country, which means so Y times capital. I mean, you get return per capital you are actually spending per your capital that exists in your uh, uh, in the economy. Well, you might say the returns are not well. The returns are not per new investments. They are per usually calculated per whole capital that exists in the economy. Um, Although that might this type of calculation can be questioned. This is actually the case. And then, in order to get the capital, the share of the um, capital capital from the income, you need to divide it to Y. So R times K is the return of capital, and Y is actually the income, national income. But in the long run, the capital Y ratio basically will converge to S over G. So if savings are larger than growth, if you save but that doesn't translate to growth, it is likely that capital amount will be larger in the economy. And in order to have relatively, in order to keep them, well, if Y is not increasing as fast as the capital, basically, normally if R is, well, remaining the same, share of capital will be larger compared with Y, basically, because Y is K is increasing a lot, but Y is not increasing as much. So the return of capital will be. I mean, this huge capital stock that keeps increasing and increasing continues to bring a lot of revenue, while actual output is not rising, which means actually the share of the workers is getting smaller. Of course, physically workers might be getting more, but out of total output, their share is getting smaller. So this is starting point of Piketty, and here he goes. This is value of private capital with respect to national income. So this K over Y ratio, which should be equal to S over G. As you see, it is increasing in time in most of the countries, United States, Germany, Britain, Canada, Japan, France, Italy, and Austria from 1970s to 2010. So it started from a range in 1970s 200 and 400, and now it is at the range of 400 and 700. And when you look to the saving rates, of course, it is the total saving rates are like that. But when you look to private saving rates, especially when you discount public saving, which is usually negative in most countries, it's negative. In Japan, it is 14.5, for example. In Germany, it is 12.2. In Italy, it is 15.0. In the United States, it is 7.6. And you can also look to the growth rates, and growth rates are mostly much less than this amount. And here is actually the Piketty's trick. So value of private capital with respect to national income. As you can see, in 1870s to 1910s, you see a relatively high value of capital with respect to national income. So when this value of capital with respect to national income gets too large, so if capital gets a lot of revenue, it invests it partially back. It gets more revenue, it invests back, so capital stock increases. But that increasing capital stock maybe is not accompanied with the well improvement in labor conditions or infrastructure or things like that. So basically, this relative increase of private capital with respect to total income, which leads to also the relative increase in the capital share from the income. The capitalists become more well, as this relative quantity differences exist, as this relative huge wealth exists with respect to the total income. So in other words, I mean, the wealth of people own, which was already produced, is much larger than what is produced in that year. That actually will lead to stagnation and relatively low growth rate, which happened in 1910s and 1930s, and which lead to also decrease in the value of private capital with respect to the national income. And 1950s, where this number is lowest, was also the time when the growth rate starts to increase. But as growth rate starts to increase, well, up to 1970s, there's a slight increase in value of private capital, but then that increase has been drastic, and it has gone all the way up to, over 400%. And this is the projection. I mean, the rest is the projection, and the projection actually shows that maybe it might go. The value of capital with respect to national income might go even above 600% in 2000, 2100, say, or 2100, the year, that year basically, 2100. So these are labor income and the capital income. And basically, the time of crisis in 1890 and 1910, you see a drastic, you see a relative decrease, although it is slight when you look at the whole table, but it's not that slight when you look to the up to that point, basically. The number was between 1960 and 70, and there is a decline in labor income. There is an increase in the capital income between these years, and then you have a drastic shift, basically, and another increase up to 1970s. So that's the time when the potential inequalities in the economic system were decreasing, and according to Piketty, that creates a better conditions for growth. And he has other graphs to support this argument. Especially after 1980s, you see again a decrease in labor share and increase in capital share. And these are the returns to capital and observed returns and observed average rate of return and pure rate of return to capital. Observed returns don't take into account all costs, basically, and you see basically the returns are they have been decreasing since 1930s, basically. And you can see actually the returns decrease after 1930s, and there's an increase up to the 1930s. Well, the conclusions might be questionable. However, you can see that as the value of the capital is decreasing with respect to total national income, the returns to capital has increased actually. So R itself might be balancing in the end. I mean, the total share of capital might be increasing. However, as you see in the previous part, to some extent, at the periods when capital with respect to capital stock with respect to output is growing. However, still if the capital stock is really too large, inevitably the return rate might also decrease. So as capital becomes more relative, the value of capital decreases, the returns have actually increased, and then as capital become again massive with respect to the output level, the returns of the capital has decreased. So in other words, I mean, having too valuable capital stock, which Piketty might also describe as a wealth stock, too large wealth stock, might be problematic basically. And inequality actually make people to create this huge wealth stock and keep that wealth stock, but in return that decreases the relative growth rates in the economic system, which might be to some extent because maybe, I mean, the saving rates might still be high, so people might be investing, but people might be rather investing in safe things, and the actual pressure from down might get weaker, basically. And they might also spend, as the capital stock is really very large, they might also spend more effort to increasing their share. Actually, this lower growth rate itself might make companies to put more effort to increase the share of the capital so that they can survive, and the potential effort to create growth rate might get smaller. And this, when you consider this huge amount of capital, getting a high enough growth rate might be actually difficult in this case. And also the people with this huge wealth level are relatively safe, because this income from wealth is continuously coming, and that safety created by the inequality of the system might also one reason why investments might be relatively less drastic and less risky, and just aiming continue to get this flow coming. Piketty's solution. So when you have this relatively large wealth stock compared with the production level, that's hurting the economic system. So you should basically decrease this wealth stock ideally, and you should, according to Piketty, this can be done by taxing the capital, the total wealth people are having in their hands, and also their revenue, the investments they make, should be regulated, but that tax and regulation should be at global level, because capital can easily escape to the countries with lower tax, as we have seen. So there should be some kind of global agreement in how to tax the capital, basically, and that agreement should be applied to in all countries of the world, according to Piketty. So this is pretty much, of course, a very, very rough summary of Piketty's ideas on the capital and basically its the effect of its amount on the growth rate globally, basically, and how actually also explains how actually the main dynamic, main regulations, main ways of combating with the potential problems created by this huge capital stock can only be done at the global level. So the remedy should be global level, not national remedies won't work, according to Piketty. So this is the end of this lecture. I hope to see you in the next lecture, and as always, I hope you will stay healthy.